Who was Ferdinand Marcos? Ferdinand Marcos was born on September 11, 1917, in Ilocos Norte Province, was a member of Philippine House of Representatives 1949 to 1959 and Senate 1959 to 1965 before winning the presidential election. After winning a second term, he declared martial law in 1972, establishing with wife Imelda an autocratic regime based on widespread favoritism that eventually led to economic stagnation and recurring reports of human rights violations. Marcos held onto presidency until 1986 when his people rose against his dictatorial rule and he was forced to flee. He died on September 28, 1989 in exile on Honolulu, Hawaii. When the Marcoses went into exile, they took with them a reported $15 million. However, the government of the Philippines was aware Marcos had collected a far larger fortune. The country's Supreme Court estimated he had amassed $10 billion while in office. Marcos wed singer and beauty queen Imelda Romualdez in 1954 after an 11-day courtship, with the couple going on to have 3 children, Maria Imelda or Amy, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos, and Irene. And later, Marcos adopted a 4th child, Amy. Marcos was inaugurated on December 30, 1965. His first presidential term was notable for his decision to send troops into the fray of the Vietnam War, a move he had previously opposed as a Liberal Party senator. He also focused on construction projects and bolstering the country's rice production. Marcos was reelected in 1969, the first Filipino president to win a second term, but violence and fraud were associated with this campaign, which was believed to be funded with millions from the national treasury.
Authoritarian regime and crony capitalism. Marcos decreed martial law in 1972 with Imelda, eventually becoming an official who often appointed her relatives to lucrative governmental and industrial positions. She will later be known for accumulating upward of 1,000 pairs of shoes along Manhattan luxury real estates. These acts were parts of Marcos' state-imposed crony capitalism, by which private businesses were seized by the government and handed over to friends and relatives of regime members, later leading to much economic instability. Through making domestic headway over time with infrastructure project and harvesting, Marcos' administration boosted the military by huge numbers, recruiting unqualified personnel, curtailed public discourse, took over the media, and imposed political opponents, student and denouncer at will. Marcos also oversaw a 1973 national referendum that allowed him to hold the power indefinitely. Preceding a visit by Pope John Paul II, martial law ended in January 1981. Marcos, serving as both president and prime minister by this point, resigned from the latter post, still retaining the power to implement laws and his command and imprison dissenters without due process. In June 1981, he would win presidential election for another 6 years with his political opponents boycotting the vote. Downfall. Implicated in Aquino assassination. On August 21, 1983, the previously jailed Benigno Aquino Jr. returned from his long exile to offer the Philippine people a new phase of hope. But he was shot and killed as he stepped off the plane in Manila. Countrywide demonstration followed the wake of the killing. Marcos launched a civil-based independent commission whose finding implicated military personnel in Aquino assassination. Although it has since it has since been suggested that Marcos or his wife had ordered the murder. With the counter-economy implementing and Aquino's murder becoming part of the national consensusness, the urban wealthy and the middle class, often core supporters of Marcos, began to push an end to his power. Also, contributing to Marcos' downfall was a far-reaching communist insurgery and the resolution signed in 1985 by 56 assemblymen calling for his impeachment for reaching his personal coffers via crony capitalism, monopolies, and overseas investment that violated the law. To quiet the opposition and reassert his power, Marcos called for his special presidential election to be held in 1986, a bit more than a year before the end of his current 6-year term. The popular Corazon Aquino, the widow of Benigno, became the presidential candidate of the opposition. Marcos managed to defeat Aquino and retain the presidency, but his victory was deemed by many of fraudulent as the word spread of rigged election. A tense standoff ensued between supporters of Marcos and those of Aquino, with thousands upon thousands citizens taking the streets to support a non-violent military revolution. Bukod pa dito, martial law was declared by Ferdinand Marcos, o tinatawag nating batas militar, na umiral sa Pilipinas noong Setyembre 1972 hanggang Enero 1981. Sa loob ng panahong ito, maraming paglabag at pang-aabuso ang naganap sa karapatang pantao ng di ilang Pilipino. Kabilang dito ang hindi makataong pagpapakihirap o torture, panggagahasa, pangingidap na kadalasan ay nauuwi sa pagpatay o tuluyang pagkawala ng ilan.
Exile, death, and burial. With his health failing, support for his regime fading past on February 25, 1986, Ferdinand Marcos and much of his family were airlifted from the Manila President Palace. Going into exile in Hawaii, evidence was later uncovered showing that Marcos and his associates had stolen billions from the Philippines economy. Focusing on racketeering charges, federal grand jury then indicted both of the Marcoses but Ferdinand's death in Honolulu in 1989. From cardiac arrest after ailments, Imelda was acquitted of all charges and returned to the Philippines of the following year. That she went to face other legal challenge. Background and early life. Ferdinand Marcos was born on September 11, 1917 in municipality of Sarat, part of the Ilocos Norte. He went to the school in Maynila and later attended law school at the University of the Philippines. Success in politics. During World War II, Ferdinand Marcos served as an officer with his country's armed force, later claiming that he was also a top figure in the Filipino guerrilla resistance movement. At the end of the war, when the American government granted the Philippines independence on July 4, 1946, the Philippines Congress was created.